for the union government, which had argued against legalizing same-sex unions. The decision comes more than 5 years after the apex court struck down Section 377, decriminalizing homosexuality. In a marathon 10-day hearing, the court took up 21 petitions and had reserved its orders 5 months ago. Now, while the decision on not granting legal status to same-sex marriage was unanimous, the court was divided on several other issues, including civil unions and the right to adoption. Now, let me quickly run you through the verdict. No legal recognition for same-sex marriage. The court also declined to allow legal status to civil unions by a 3:2 majority. The court left the Special Marriages Act untouched, effectively leaving the decision on marriage equality to the lawmakers. The court also disallowed same-sex couples from jointly adopting a child. The court also directed the government to protect the rights of the LGBTQ community. It has called for a panel to be formed to address practical concerns of same-sex couples. All 5 judges unanimously agree that being queer is not an urban or elitist concept. Well, now to take this discussion ahead, I'm now joined by Tanushree Bhalla and Meera Kaura Patel, interveners in this case. Akshay, Tyagi, Head of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at the Lalit Suri Hospitality Group, is also with us. Dr. Prasad, Dandekar, oncologist at the Reliance Foundation, is due to join us shortly. Ms. Patel, let me come to you first. Your quick thoughts on the Supreme Court judgment. And I ask you this in context of Section 377. September 6, 2018 is when the Supreme Court decriminalized homosexuality. Section 377 was struck down. It included within that judgment a whole host of recognition of LGBTQ rights. 5 years hence, have we taken a step forward after today's judgment from a constitution bench of the apex court?
Well, we had a lot of expectations given the trajectory that had developed in the LGBTQI rights movement. The way things had proceeded, the judgments that had been pronounced, right from Suresh Kumar Kaushal, then Govt Johar, Swami. So our expectations definitely have not been met. And after 5 years, we exactly stand where we were 5 years ago.
Ms. Tanushree, let me take that across to you. We were speaking this afternoon in the Supreme Court lawns. You had some very interesting thoughts to share that as far as this judgment is concerned, it's taken 1 step back and 2 steps backwards. 1 step in front and 2 steps backwards. I stand corrected there. Ms. Tanushree, your quick take on that. Have we just pushed the can down the road, or have we taken any meaningful steps after today's judgment?
On one hand, it shows that the learned bench has empathized with the issues that exist. But as when we spoke, even at that time I said we bow to the majesty of the apex court, and we would like to actually go through the complete judgment once it is published to understand what remedy lies ahead. Of course, remedy does lie ahead. There's always a remedy whenever there's an issue, and the court is not going anywhere. It has just tried to entrust the union government with the remedies. In perspective of going backwards or going forwards, the whole thing is that my only point was that, which I even raised in the beginning, that earlier there was a certain ambiguity which in light of the Nalsa judgment, Navtej judgment, individual cases, people were getting reliefs because in law it wasn't explicitly prohibited to get married to a same-sex partner. So that ambiguity was there, and only in specific cases of discrimination, like in Arun Kumar, people went to court and they did get relief. Now what has happened is that the gloves are off. A battle which was earlier ambiguous is now like an open battle. So in that sense, people who were getting relief on case-by-case basis, now it will also get tough for them until obviously this is revised and either the law evolves or the society evolves, either way. So that is sort of setback definitely to people who've been waiting for so many years. And laws are not formed. Legislation doesn't come overnight, especially for a large population like ours. That's the thing.
Sure, Ms. Bhalla. Sure, Ms. Bhalla. Dr. Ragnikar is also with us now. Dr. Ragnikar, let me come across to you for your first reaction on this. The Supreme Court holding unequivocally that there is no fundamental right to marry, number one. And number two, the Supreme Court has also steered shy of granting any legal status to civil unions between same-sex partners.
Of course, very, very disappointed and very upset about it. And I have been waiting for the last 19 years. Me and my partner have been together for 19 years, and we have been waiting for this day. But when we look at the larger picture, we do know that the Supreme Court could not have created a law for this, and it was sort of a very strange impasse. And I'm sure I'm not the lawyer, but the lawyers know about this much better. I feel that if we look at 5 years ago, and today, I feel there is a bit of a step forward. Now, if I had gone to the government and said, I want to get married and you create a law, the government was not going to listen to me and not going to get anything done, right? Now, at least we have a Supreme Court, which is saying that the government should form a committee and they should look into this, they should not discriminate. And also the CJI has in a very detailed manner pointed out what are the aspects that they need to look at. So it's not just the civil partnership, but what are the rights that come with it. So I think that is a step forward. It's not the step that I was looking for. I was already looking for booking a wedding venue. That has not happened. But I feel now the ball is in the government's court. But at least that ball has been thrown by the Supreme Court and not by somebody else. So I'm sure something will move forward.
Sure. Mr. Tyagi, let me come across to you now. As far as this entire conversation is concerned, the government has fought tooth and nail. Their official on the record, their submissions to the Apex Court was that this is not in keeping with our sanskar. The government's submission was that marriage can only be permitted between a biological male and a biological female. With these submissions in mind, when the Supreme Court kicks the can down the road in favor of the legislature, in favor of the parliament, does that give you confidence on the way forward from here? Mr. Tyagi, that question is aimed at you.
Okay. So, can you repeat the question once, Ashmit? I think I had a glitch in between.
Mr. Tyagi, the question that I wanted to pose is that the government has fought tooth and nail against allowing legal status for same-sex marriages. Now that the Supreme Court has said that, look, it's not our baby, this is something that should be left to the collective wisdom of the legislators, of the parliament. Does that fill you with confidence, or does that give you perhaps some pessimism on the way forward?
Oh, okay. So being very honest, I think there is a long way forward from here. And it's something that now is a time when all the corporate organizations, all the NGOs, the activism has to be even more stronger for the advocacy that we all have been working really hard for since years. We have had huge faith in the Constitution. And of course, with the CGI, we all were expecting a positive verdict, especially when it comes to at least recognition of the civil unions and a way forward. But honestly, like Dr. Prasad also mentioned, that it came as a disappointment, but there is a long way forward from here. And I think it's time now that all of us collectively come forward and work on strategies and the policies which could actually pave good report as well as case study forward to bring in the consensus to allow people be themselves. And it's time that we all come together to understand the challenges. And it is important because I think today, when all of this was happening, one thing that was really pinching me very tight was that had it been somebody queer being there on one of those panels amongst these five, and because our lawyers had fought really, really hard, and all the arguments that they all have possessed in the Supreme Court were valid enough, but like we all had seen, there is still a long way to go. And with respect to Parliament, I think there is a lot more. Like Dr. Prasad said, that of course now there is Supreme Court who had advocated and who is now telling all of us that this should be routed through the Parliament. They have definitely made one step there in that direction, but yeah, there is still a long way to go and there's still a lot to be expecting from.
Sure. Ms. Patel, let me take that point across to you. The point that the Apex Court has made, and this is pretty common across all the 4 judgments that we had today, that there is a Lakshman Rekha between the legislature as well as the judiciary. That Lakshman Rekha should not be crossed. Is this a fit case? We've seen in the past where both the sides are complaining about crossing and breaching of that Lakshman Rekha. The Parliament as well as the executive on many occasions has pointed fingers at the Apex Court. Is this a missed opportunity where the Apex Court, at the risk of crossing the Lakshman Rekha, could have perhaps allowed at least a legal status for some form of civil union, if not marriage, maybe a legal status to civil union between same-sex partners?
Well, to be able to answer that question, we'll have to first examine whether there is an existing framework for civil unions. So as if now the laws that are available pertain to the marriage laws, the matrimonial laws that are there. Under the matrimonial laws, only the court initially began to examine, because the challenge in the main petition was to the provision of Special Marriage Act. So the court proceeded to examine the provision of Special Marriage Act only to see whether the provisions could be in any manner read into, whether words could be read into. That exercise, even while we were arguing the matter, we could see the court's concern that, this is not merely interpreting provisions of the Act. There would be substantial reading into required. And at that point of time, I think that line between judicial review of a particular legislation and drafting something, legislating something became more apparent. Sure. And I think that is the reason why the Honorable Court has actually not taken that step of stepping into the legislative domain and have left this to the Parliament. So far as civil unions are concerned, we do not have any separate law governing that. So had there been a legislation governing the civil union, civil partnerships, there could be a possibility that, these kind of unions could have been governed under that law. But unfortunately, as we stand today, we have either the matrimonial laws or certain laws which recognize live-in relationships in the nature of marriage, which is the Domestic Violence Act. But that is only for the purposes of giving the remedies. What we were seeking in the petitions and what the interveners were seeking was a legal sanctity of their relationship. For that, there needs to be a law which needs to be interpreted.
Fair enough. Ms. Bhalla, if I come to you, were the petitioners, I dare say, being a little too optimistic in this case? Because the concerns that had been pointed out by the centre through the Solicitor General were quite valid to the extent that they said, how do we deal with the plethora of laws that very clearly provide for man versus woman, husband versus wife? All of those laws would need to be redrafted. All those laws need to be re-amended. So whether that's your personal laws, even your penal code, in the Indian Penal Code, even your CRPC, all of these aspects would require lengthy deliberations and amendments. Clearly something that the Apex Court believes it wasn't geared for. So was this perhaps an unrealistic expectation in the first place?
To be honest, it isn't. And I would like to address your question in 4 stages because there are a few things that I wish to add, right? So let me start with the point of sanskar, which you first mentioned, right? Now, in my submission to the Honorable Court, and I've also mentioned this earlier, the first mention of these marriages is mentioned in the Naradiya Smriti, which was written somewhere in thousands of BCs ago by Maharishi Narad, which actually makes a trans man, unfit for marriage to a straight woman. That is one thing. Even in your astrology, media is a profession ruled by Mercury. So Budh is married to Ira, and which is a transgender union, again in your Vedas. So a queer marriage is by no means not a part of our ancient religion. In fact, it is very much very much a part of our ancient Hindu religion, not sanitized. That was not sanitized by colonial powers, right? That is for one. Secondly, coming to the aspect of sensitization of rights and what is the road ahead. One thing I said, Ashwin, that we need to stop putting everything on basically the legislature and this and that and wait. There are a lot of private entities that can still give rights as the Honorable Supreme Court said that sensitize people, because private entities, for example, if a bank, as we spoke, if a bank wants to allow, and a bank already does allow, LGBT couples to open a joint account and give them those benefits, nobody can stop them. Who's stopping them? The government is not telling them. There's no ban on it. So, I guess the corporate sector, the private sector can also take a leap in that sensitization if it may like to go in that way. Now, coming to your question, if you may kindly just rephrase that question, I would like to address it specifically. Can you hear me?
I had asked about what the way forward would be from here, given as well the situation that we have, where the apex court has kicked the can down the road and suggested that it's the legislature that needs to perhaps play a pivotal role in drafting a legal framework. But these are questions that have been raised importantly by the apex court, and that burden importantly has now been shifted to a high-powered committee. What does that committee entail? Ms. Bhalla, stay with us. I'm being told that we need to head into a very short break. We'll come back in just a short bit. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue this conversation on the other side. Well, welcome back. You are watching Court Corner with me, Ashmit Kumar. I have with me a very distinguished panel. Ms. Bhalla, let me come back to you. The question that we were talking about is on the way forward. The Supreme Court said that, look, there is a high-powered committee, which the centre has suggested. The Supreme Court believes that this committee will be the one to show us the roadmap on the way forward. Three questions. There is no timeline. There is no clarity on the composition of this expert committee. And there is no clarity on the mandate of the committee. These are questions very pertinent, which again raise the question that will it be 6 months or will it be 6 years after we begin to get some clarity? Ms. Bhalla.
Okay, now I remembered the question that you asked me. So these are basically in your three questions that you've asked me, and one prior to that. What effect will be on the other laws? So basically, the fact is that the interpretation of the act that we had given to the court was to we had humbly submitted that a man be interpreted to include a cis man, a trans man, or any person identifying as a man in the relationship. Similarly, for a woman, and then thereafter to consider intersex and trans persons. Now, the Honorable Court has understood and empathized and recognized the rights of trans people who are in a marriage. That is for one. Secondly, if certain interpretations were given effect, it would not affect any other laws as of now, especially not the IPC or something, because first of all, IPC as it is to a great extent, except where it affects women, is gender neutral. And secondly, given customary laws, the Honorable Court had already said that it won't be touching any customary laws as of now. The idea was only focused on SMA and then to look at other laws as and when the problem came. That's how the law evolved. So that is one thing done. Now coming to the next part of your question as to the timelines. So if I may reiterate, if you may refer to Honorable Chief Justice Sir's pronouncement of his particular judgment, he gave very particular suggestions, actually very particular timelines uh, regarding the directions as to, all of them, first of all, agree that it should go under the cabinet secretary. And secondly, there should be a timeline, so on and so forth. However, the majority judgment, which is Justice Bhatt's judgment, yes, that is slightly more relaxed. Now, obviously, if you may look at it from the point of view, from a practical perspective, we live in a country of 1.45 billion people. No legislation can be brought overnight. But it did come in the Transgender Act 2019. Nalsa judgment came in 2014. The government did bring the act in 2019. So yes, from that point of view, it can be a few years, and no law should be made without application of mind. So yes, it does take time. But from a more public-minded,
So glass half full for you.
perspective, I'll just take 1 second to finish. People who've been fighting for such a long time and waiting for such a long time, for them, yes, even this wait would be excruciatingly painful, and we cannot deny that. So that is there.
Right, Ms. Bhalla. So you're looking at it as glass half full, that at least there is something to look forward to. Mr. Ragnikar,
Yes.
as someone who has been waiting to in fact celebrate a union with your partner, which you've now been not able to for many years that you pointed out, does this give you confidence? We have a situation where the centre, while opposing tooth and nail in the Supreme Court, is also simultaneously giving the assurance that don't worry, we'll constitute a committee, we'll address your concerns.
So one of the things that I'm very happy about is at least we are a country where everything works. There is a Supreme Court, there is a Parliament, and when I look around, I think we are in a much better shape than many of the countries around us. So from that point of view, I am hopeful. And if we look at the way our country is progressing, and there are a lot of changes happening, and things will change. They may not change at the speed that I would like them to change, but they will change. And these sorts of conversations are actually very useful for that change, because these are the conversations which are bringing that legal conversation or moral conversation or religious conversation onto the dining table, and the families will talk about it, and that is how the society at large will change. So I think as one of the panelists mentioned, that it may take few years for this to happen, but I guess we'll have to just wait and hope that it happens faster. And I'm sure there's a lot of people already starting to work on this matter.
Sure. Sure. Mr. Tyagi, coming to you for closing comments, the nature of conversations that surround the subject of LGBTQ rights, do you see a noticeable change? And if that change is in keeping with the momentum that is required to realize your aspirations of the same legal status as heterosexual couples?
Absolutely. I think, like Dr. Prasad also mentioned, that if you really look back in 2018, when Supreme Court decriminalized homosexuality, and until today, we have seen a very momentum change in the entire space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so to say, the inclusion of LGBTQI community members in the country. The conversations have definitely gone extreme high. In every conversation, at least at the Lalit, we have been ensuring to queer the pitch in whatever context we do. At the same time, the kind of work that we as a country had done in the space of transgender upliftment and empowering the community, that's also is something that we are extremely proud about. And it will take some time, but like one of the panelists also mentioned, that this is the first step, and there is a long way to go from here. And once, in 5 years, the Nalsa judgment was implemented, from here, our advocacy, our efforts have to just ramp up. And it is time now, because I come from corporate space, so I would like to ensure that at the Lalit, we have insurance policies for same-sex partners, and there is so much that corporate organizations can do as an individual entity to bring forth the community voices, and at the same time create that safe space for communities to be themselves and to take pride in who they are. So it's time that we start to create and be part of those narratives wherein people find themselves reflected and represented, so that their voices get more strength. At the same time, we must remember that in Section 377 as well, when the Supreme Court read the judgment, sensitization was again one of the important aspects. But if you really see that coming from legislation or from the authorities, that's still a distant dream. But corporates have done a significant job in taking that judgment back to their workspaces and have open forums back in the workspaces to discuss about equal rights or equitable
Right,
rights
Mr. Tyagi.
for communities that have been less represented. So yeah, there is a lot to be accepted.
Right, Mr.
into
Tyagi.
this.
Right, Mr. Tyagi. That, in fact, was one of the very points that Ms. Bhalla had made, that perhaps on the corporate front as well, the industry can take the lead. But, of course, that was not the demand. The demand before the Apex Court was for the Supreme Court to take the lead and to give more clarity on the way forward. The Supreme Court has deferred a decision on that and has, in fact, passed it on to the legislature, saying that they exercise the will of the public through collective wisdom, and that is the way forward, that the Supreme Court, the courts, will not cross the Lakshman Rekha. So that's the big takeaway here from the Apex Court. That, unfortunately, is all the time that we have. It's a wrap on this special edition of the Court Corner. More news and updates will continue right here on the other side.